Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes from Patrick Dodds, who says, Steve, if I could throw out a hypothetical scenario, let's say that humankind sloughed off all religion and atheism became the primary school of thought. Would education and legislation be enough to make the world a better place than the global madhouse we currently have? If not, what would be your potential third or more thing we'd need to make it better? Well, the problem with that question is that it sort of assumes that religion is the only thing that is keeping us from having a utopian world, and I just don't think it's that simple. I think that there are lots of things that we would need in order to have that kind of a world, to make the world, not just a slightly better place, or a better place for some people, but a much better place. A transformed world where it's a peaceful, wonderful world for most people. I don't think atheism is even necessary for that, much as I consider myself an atheist and think that atheism is the correct position on questions of the existence of gods. I don't necessarily think we would have to have atheism be the most widely accepted school of thought in order to achieve a better world. I think things like solidarity are much more important. Human solidarity that transcends the artificial lines that we sort of draw around ourselves, that is not tribalism, that is not nationalism, that is not based on skin color or language or appearance or subcultures, but is a true human solidarity, a recognition that we are all in this together. We all share this world with each other and with the other forms of life, and in fact with the rest of the universe. It sounds like hippy-dippy bullshit, but I think a recognition of our oneness and our shared life on this planet would be much more important and much more necessary to having that kind of an improved world than sloughing off religion in favor of atheism. Sylvanus Windrunner. Hi Steve, I've noticed that you tend to stick to a 30-minute format with these You Had to Ask episodes, and I know that you don't manage to fit all questions into them because I don't get my questions answered most of the time even. Would you consider making a special episode sometime where you extend the video to maybe 1 hour, 1.5, or 2 hours of asking and answering? Also, glory to the Forsaken, swear fealty to the Banshee Queen. It's striking a balance between answering as many questions as I can and producing a video that I think somebody might want to watch. Yeah, I could just say, you know what, I'm going to answer every question and do a video that's 1.5 hours or 2 hours long every week. But not only would that be much more of a pain in the ass for me to edit, it would be much more of an endurance trial for people to watch. And I want to make videos that people are willing to watch. Most of the time, actually, even though I always get more questions than I can answer in the 30 minutes. But the most common reason for me not including what I would otherwise consider a good question in the video is not time. It's that I just don't have a good answer for it. And that goes back to the having a good watchable video. If someone asks a really awesome, insightful question and I just don't know what to say in response to it, that is my shortcoming. But it doesn't make it into the video, because why would I put a question in a Q&A video that I don't have an answer to? It all comes back to the video. The final product has to be worth seeing, or it's not even worth bothering to make in the first place. Nom the Food. Hey Steve, my question is about Mary Jane. Yep, weed. I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are for legalization. But that's not the same as a personal opinion on the drug. Have you ever used it? Do you think it's okay to use? I guess I'd just like to know what you think about marijuana on a personal level. Sincerely, you guessed it, a Dutchman. I have never, ever used it. In my 35 years in this life, I have never once used marijuana. And I've never once wanted to. And it's not that I don't mean to say that like I'm better than that, or I'm above it, or people who smoke weed are just losers, or I'm better than that. I've just never been interested in it. I don't see the point. I don't feel a need or a compulsion to do it. It's just never been remotely interesting to me at all. If I feel like I need some kind of a chemical alteration, I can have a beer. That is just fine with me. So no, I've never used it, so I can't give you a personal opinion on, what the experience is like, or what I'm like when I'm high. I've never been high. I've never smoked pot, so I don't know. And as for, do I think it's okay for other people to use? I don't care. That's not my decision to make. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think there's really a moral component to it. If you want to use it and you get something out of it, then good for you. I don't see how I am involved in that decision in any way. It's not my job to decide what other people should or shouldn't do with their own bodies. I mean, they're not really hurting anything. Yeah, and you're right. I do think it should be legalized. My position on marijuana, as I've said in several videos in the past, is legalize it, regulate it, and tax the shit out of it. But even after it's legalized, I'm sure that I won't be using it myself. I'm just not interested in it. Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. Hey Steve, what would you say deep down is your favorite rock band of all time and why? Mine would be anywhere from AC/DC, Van Halen, Fleetwood Mac, or Aerosmith. What about you? That would depend greatly on what we are defining as band. If Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band counts as a band rather than a solo act, then it's Bruce Springsteen. It's not even close. I don't even know who second place would be. I mean, there's lots of bands, rock bands that I really love, from like the big giant ones like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or Led Zeppelin. Two more modern bands that haven't quite attained that ultra legendary status, like Modest Mouse or Built to Spill. But yeah, if you ask me who is my all-time favorite, bar none, it's Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. When Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band played Land of Hope and Dreams on Jon Stewart's last Daily Show, I swear to God, and my wife can attest to this because she was sitting next to me, I almost fucking cried. That's how much I love Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. So that would be my answer to that question. William Wright. My apologies if I've asked too many questions, but as both a film fan and someone who involves themselves in social justice, what are your thoughts on the recent Stonewall controversy? And just like that, I'm in another room and recording on another camera. Sorry about this, everybody, but the power adapter for my main camera broke, and I ran down all my batteries, and for some reason I don't have an external battery charger that is compatible with the batteries for my Canon camera. So until the new charger gets here in a day or two, I'm on the webcam, so I hope you don't mind. Anyway, as to the question about the Stonewall movie, the first red flag for me was when I learned that it was directed by Roland Emmerich, who is also the director of Independence Day and the 1997 version of Godzilla. He just doesn't strike me as the ideal filmmaker to dramatize the Stonewall riots, which ignited the modern LGBT rights movement. The director of crappy action schlock is not who I would have picked to tell that story. So that's number one. And of course, the main reason why people are upset about this movie is that, judging by the trailer, it places a fictionalized white cis gay man at the forefront of the riots, and it depicts him as throwing the brick that started the riot, when in reality, in history, it's generally agreed that the person to throw that brick to start the Stonewall demonstration was Marsha Johnson, who was black and trans and was also a real person and a very important activist, even apart from the role she played in Stonewall. She was just a very well-known and very important figure in the gay community in New York in the 1960s. And to have her sort of moved aside and replaced by this made-up white guy, it's upset a lot of people, and I completely understand that. I share that feeling. You know, it's difficult because this is not the first time this sort of thing has happened. We have a very bad habit, especially in our Hollywood movies, of having to put white people in the foreground, even if we're telling a story that is not really about white people. And I'm not saying that white people weren't involved in Stonewall. That's not what I'm saying. But it seems like they're placing, like, a white person has to be at the center of a story or else they fear that the broad audience won't be able to relate to it or won't be interested in it. I think of another example, the movie Glory, which I think is actually a really good movie, but is problematic because it's the story of the first and the most decorated, the most renowned all-black regiment of the Union Army during the Civil War, the 54th Massachusetts, and the lead character of the film is a white guy, is Colonel Shaw, the white man who was the leader, the commanding officer of the regiment. And it's not that Colonel Shaw's story doesn't deserve to be told. It's just a little strange to make a film that is clearly built on the idea of the heroism and the valor and the sacrifice of the black soldiers in the 54th, and the main character is a white guy. So this is not the first time this sort of thing has happened. Hopefully the Stonewall movie will be a good movie despite its problematic nature, despite its kind of crappy director. Hopefully maybe it will encourage people to seek out the real history of the Stonewall move, of the Stonewall protest. It'll encourage people to find the real story. That's the best I can hope for. But yeah, the problems people have with it as a film and as a piece of social activism, I'm right there with them. Sabrina Luizides Meredith. Hey Steve, what's your take on atheists who tell their children the Santa story? I have one friend whose husband thinks it's a gateway to theism, but I think it's the other way around. My daughter is 5 and we are doing the Santa thing because it's fun and essentially harmless. When she discovers the truth, and she will, we won't try to hide it or extend the magic with those horrid elf on a shelf things. Do you think it's just a harmless fiction? And if you had a kid, would you bring Santa into its life? I was raised as a child to believe in Santa Claus, and here I am as an atheist, so it didn't provide a gateway to theism to me. And I think in the case of most people, the gateway to theism, if we're talking about Christian theism, is not Santa Claus, it's Jesus. Parents who want to raise their children in a Christian faith don't need to fuck around by easing them into it with Santa. In my experience, they start hitting them with the Jesus stuff pretty heavy, pretty early. No, I agree with you, and I've talked about this with other, with friends of mine who have kids and who have done the same thing. It's actually a gateway to atheism if you shepherd the child through it in the right way. It's you are told from an early age that Santa exists, that he's real, and then you grow up and you start to see the holes in the story, and you grow up a little more and it starts to dawn on you what is really going on, and eventually you learn to accept that there is no Santa Claus, even though you really, really believe that there was a Santa Claus, and even though you might really want there to be a Santa Claus, you have to come to grips with the fact that no, there is no Santa Claus. Now, on another level, I think it's kind of fucked up that we tell children something that isn't true, and we tell it to them in such a way that they believe it to be true and not just a story or a fun dream or something, but they really believe that there is a Santa Claus, and then they find out much, much later when they become teenagers that, oh, my parents were deliberately deceiving me for all those years. They were telling me something that they knew wasn't true. But that's just, I kind of look at it that way for the sake of humor, for the sake of making kind of an observation, or for pointing out an absurdity in our behavior. I really don't think there's anything that wrong with it. And I certainly don't think that it is inconsistent with atheism. Gilid Ganef. Hey Steve, I go to a certain accredited Christian university in Virginia. I had finished about 3 years of my degree there when I, A, realized I was bi, B, realized I might be trans, C, realized that I would rather be an atheist who believed in science and shit than be a Christian who was repressed and self-loathing about my identity forever. So now I'm stuck in buttfuck Virginia, telling everyone I'm saving up money to finish my degree, but really just postponing going back to school as long as possible. So my question to you is, should I bite the bullet, hide my private life from everyone, and get the rest of my degree here? Or should I try to transfer to another more enlightened school and lose 2 or 3 full semesters of required Bible and theology classes in the process? Or, hey, can I just move back to Nova and live with you? I could be like your atheist apprentice. That last one's not going to happen. Primarily because I don't live in Northern Virginia. I live in Western Maryland. But no, it's tough. I mean, it's tempting to say that you should just bite the bullet and tough it out and just finish the degree. But on the other hand, I have this voice in my head that keeps saying life is too short. Life is too fucking short. And if you've just realized that you don't want to live this way anymore, that you don't want to hide who you are, and you don't want to have to fucking tough it out and just get through school just so you can finish because you were already almost finished when you had all these realizations about yourself. There's part of me that says, man, life is too short for that shit. Fuck that. Get the fuck out of there. If that's not where you want to be, then go somewhere else. If you can, if you have that capability. I mean, yeah, you'll have to go to college a little bit longer because you'll lose some credits that won't transfer. You won't finish as soon, but if you'll be finishing in a place where you really want to be, I don't know, maybe that's better. This is 3D. Serious question. Are you familiar with the phrase, there are no atheists in foxholes? And if so, do you have any life experiences that prove otherwise? I had a car accident. I was fine, but my car was totaled where I went off the road at 45 miles per hour during a rainstorm. Religion didn't pop into my mind once. All I thought was, oh shit, I'm going to die. And, well, my car is fucked. Anything like that happen to you? I remember when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, I was in a swimming pool with a friend of mine, and I had just a brief kind of just a scare where I was under the water and I couldn't quite control myself. The water was deeper than I had been in before, and I couldn't get above the water, and I started to panic a little bit. And I was never like in serious danger. I wasn't close to drowning or anything, but I had that feeling of panic, like, oh shit, what if this is it? And this is when I was a kid, when I was far from an atheist, or at least far from, wanting to be an atheist. And I felt like when the idea entered my mind that, oh shit, I might die, I felt kind of peaceful about it. And I've never been in a life-threatening situation since, but in the times that I have had to sort of confront death, be it the death of a family member or a loved one or a friend of a friend or a pet or whatever, since I have become an atheist, it's felt very much the same. And it's hard to describe. It's just a feeling of peace and acceptance. And yes, there's sadness, there's great sadness, but there's also a feeling of, this is okay. This is natural. This is what happens. There's no reason to fight this. Of course, that's all having to do with natural deaths. If I were in some kind of a situation where I was about to run into a tree or something, I don't know. Maybe I would say, oh, Jesus Christ, help me. I don't know. That doesn't mean that I'm not an atheist. It just means that I panicked and I did something crazy in a moment when I thought I was going to die anyway. So, no, I am familiar with the phrase, there are no atheists in foxholes. And I think that's horseshit. For one thing, it's incorrect. There are quite a few atheists who have served in the military and have served in foxholes, or the modern equivalent of foxholes. I don't know if they even dig foxholes anymore. What the fuck do I know? But yeah, there are atheists in foxholes. And the idea that you would necessarily turn to some religious faith in a moment of panic or a moment of feeling your life threatened is just incredibly condescending. Like just now, for instance, when I heard the thunder, and it was like the lightning was right here, and I felt like, oh my God, what if this is my time? What if the lightning is finally going to strike me? I didn't call out to God, It's just perfectly natural. Just like it's now perfectly natural for me to say that it is time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Jeff Killer Heisenberg, when did you realize that you were in love with me? And which particular attributes of mine first attracted you? As I've told you before, I'm taken. This is strictly for the historical record. One day you will be a minor footnote on my Wikipedia page. Don't thank me. I like to help the little guy. I realized I was in love with you as I was reading your question just now. And which particular attribute of yours first attracted me? Your humility. Renee Skeptic, I thought most people wore superhero watches. Yeah, well, I thought that too, Renee. And then I came to school the first day, and I had my Batman watch on, and everybody else made fun of me. So I guess not everybody has one. I wish somebody would have told me. Mom, Dad, I wish you hadn't let me walk out the door like that, knowing what was waiting for me. You knew everybody didn't wear superhero watches. But you let me go! Captain Michael, how long do you think the superhero film craze we're currently experiencing will last? And what eventually do you think will kill it off? I'm surprised that it's lasted this long. Honestly, I thought that the first Avengers movie would be the saturation point, but it has kept right on rolling. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the quality of the Marvel films has remained very high. You know, that franchise has just kept on rolling on and on and on and on, and it hasn't really hit a big bump yet. So I think that's the main thing that has kept it going. But I still think that what eventually will kill it off is just reaching saturation point. People will just get sick of all the superhero movies. I think if it doesn't happen before, it will be this 2-part Avengers movie, this Infinity Wars Avengers 2-part. I think that is going to fry our brains for superhero movies. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I was wrong before. Radical Bacon. Have you and Jason with a D met in the flesh? Why? Is he pregnant? Because, first of all, we haven't. So if he's pregnant and he's saying that it's mine, then he's lying. Because it's not mine. It can't be mine. I don't know what he told you. But we haven't met in the flesh at all. Not once. So it's not mine. If that's what he said. Is that what he said? Anyway, Matthew Patton. Hey, Steve, if you don't consider yourself someone who shreds people, would you consider yourself someone who splinters people? I would rather consider myself someone who occasionally takes a piss on someone who deserves to be pissed on. Not a splinterer, not a shredder, but an occasional lusty pisser on those who deserve to be pissed on. That's what I would say. Josh Crinzy. Lightning round. I have a question for your sexy ass. What made you become such a serious defender of feminism? Was it an experience you went through? Did you see a video that opened your eyes? Was it someone who convinced you about it? What's the story behind your feminist evolution? Thanks, Steve. Also, you said a while back that you would do a You Had to Ask with Ashley soon. So, it's up. Well, the last part is up to Ashley. I'm not going to drag her on camera if she doesn't want to be on, but she can be on anytime she wants. Occasionally I'll bring it up to her, and sometimes she says yes, and sometimes she says no. As for my feminism, my attitude toward feminism and toward women's rights has not changed in the big picture, in the broad scope, for most of my life. I've always been a supporter of women's rights. I've always been a supporter of feminism and the aims of feminism. What made me speak out more about it and be a more vocal defender of it was, one, my wife, and her encouragement and her sort of telling me to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and not just say, well, I think feminism is good, but say, hey, I want to be thought of as a feminist myself. I want to, stand up for these things and espouse these things. And also just seeing the amount of anti-feminist hate on the internet. And even, unfortunately, in the atheist community, that kind of lit a fire under me. I don't want that to speak for us. I don't want people to think that atheists are a bunch of angry, anti-feminist, woman-hating man-babies. Got that funk. If we had to have a Republican as the next president, which of the current crop of candidates would you object to the least and why? John Kasich. And object to the least is definitely the term to use, because he is not who I would vote for in a million years. I do not think he is who we should be electing president, period. But of the current crop of Republican candidates, to me, it's clearly Kasich is the most acceptable, or perhaps the least unacceptable choice. And I'll tell you a big reason for it is because during the first debate last week, he actually expressed compassion and a desire to be inclusive and welcoming to people who are different than he is. And that is first of all, it renders him unelectable as a Republican. He's never going to get the nomination now. He said that he loves gay people and wants them to feel included. So there's no way he's getting that fucking nomination. But that, to me, renders him more acceptable than the others. Jacob Zentichko. Hey, Steve, when you come up to the conference in Pennsylvania next month, is Stuffy coming too? No, Stuffy is not coming. Stuffy does not usually travel with me. He will be down here continuing his work at the Mid-Atlantic Food Bank. But I will be bringing along Dot Gregory, my pal, who is the co-host of my wrestling show, Wrestling with Wrestling, and we're coming up with another buddy of ours too. So there will be three of us, three atheists on the loose at the Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Conference in Harrisburg next month. So that'll be a lot of fun. But no, Stuffy will not be coming with me. Hey, that is it for the questions. Before I get out of here, I want to give a shout out to a very worthy channel, and the shout out this week goes to the YouTube channel of the Clergy Project. The Clergy Project is an organization that exists in order to help religious professionals, members of the clergy, pastors, ministers, etc., who no longer believe in the faith, who have become atheists or non-believers in some respect, but yet they are still in their religious surroundings. It's designed to help these people, to help them come out of religion if that's what they want, to help them deal with the conflicts between their religious responsibilities and their job and their own personal beliefs. It's a wonderful organization, and it has a wonderful YouTube channel that is packed with videos from awesome atheist voices like Dan Barker, like Daniel Dennett, like Neil Carter, who is one of my absolutely favorite people in the atheist movement at the moment. Just really, really great videos from these people talking about what the Clergy Project is, talking about this idea of coming out of religion, and what do you do if you are a pastor, let's say, and now all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, but you've come to a realization that you don't believe in this faith anymore. What do you do next? It's a very wonderful, necessary organization, and the YouTube channel for the Clergy Project is highly, highly, highly recommended. Criminally undersubscribed. So check out the YouTube channel of the Clergy Project. Now, I also want to remind you, as always, that you can listen to me in podcast form. I am the co-host of one of Jason Harding's awesome Lemme Listen podcasts, which you can listen to at soundcloud.com/Lemme-listen. The show that I'm on is Late Seating. Jason and I host Late Seating. Every 2 weeks is a new episode, and it is a movie review podcast. Our most recent episode is still up. It's the review of the classic 1927 silent film Metropolis. We will be recording our new episode this weekend, which will be up next week, and I'll tell you all about that then. But Late Seating, and you can also listen to American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, an awesome, hilarious improv comedy podcast that is like a comedy version of Coast to Coast AM. And I know what you're thinking, isn't Coast to Coast AM the comedy version of Coast to Coast AM? Work with me here. It's a great podcast. And there's also Let Me Finish with Jason and Atticus, Finite Atticus Blake. So it's awesome, an awesome roster of podcasts. I highly recommend that you check them out. Let Me Listen, soundcloud.com/Lemme-listen. Now, you may have noticed by the number of this episode, You Had to Ask number 149, that next week is You Had to Ask number 150. And to do something a little special next week, somebody actually mentioned Stuffy in the last lightning round question, and somebody asked a Stuffy question in the main section too that I just didn't have a chance to get to. It would have been in the main section if I had included it. But for the 150th episode next week, I'm inviting you guys to ask questions not only of me, but of any of the cast of the Steve and Stuffy videos. You can ask a question for Stuffy, for Toby Benson, for Jack McPherson, for Millicent, for Hans Krieger, for any of the gang, any of the characters in the Steve and Stuffy videos. You can also ask a question of me. You can ask a normal old question, or you can ask one of the animals a question, but that will be a special treat for episode 150. So leave a comment on this video asking me or Stuffy or Toby Benson or Jack or whoever your question for next time. Ask us anything about anything. Nothing is too serious, nothing is too silly, and we will answer as many of your questions as we possibly can in the next video. So until next time, take care, everybody.